Well, just 1 week since the government announced to the House of Commons they'd found one way to resolve the cladding crisis, they've hit a stumbling block. It was meant to clear the way for some of the big lenders to resume offering mortgages in buildings less than 18 metres tall, many of which became unsellable because of safety fears. So what's gone wrong? I'm joined by our policy editor, Goodall. Boris Johnson backed this deal, and it seems to be coming apart in 1 week. So what's going wrong?
Well, because it was announced a great fanfare by Robert Jenrick, the Housing Secretary, in the House of Commons just last week. It's a bit involved this, so viewers will have to bear with us. But effectively, this goes back, like so many of these building remediation issues, due to the post-Grenfell regime and the Grenfell catastrophe. In the wake of that, many leaseholders in high-rise buildings were finding it very, very difficult to get lenders, to get banks to agree mortgages on their properties because they, perhaps understandably, were saying, well, we don't know if this has got a cladding problem, we don't know if there are other fire safety problems, we don't feel comfortable in lending on those buildings. So the building industry, overseen by the government, it's not a government scheme directly, but it's overseen by the government, came up with the EWS1 form. Now, this is a form which effectively says, surveys these buildings and gives lenders confidence to say, actually, is there a cladding problem? Is there not? Are there other building safety issues? So that was one problem down. The problem is it threw up a load of other problems, which was suddenly leaseholders were discovering via the EWS1 process that not only did their building have cladding problems, which was often very costly to remove, but they may have had lots of other building safety problems as well. Now, the government, as a means of trying to ameliorate this problem, in the House of Commons last week, Robert Jenrick got up in the House of Commons and, among other things, announced that having consulted with various experts, the government no longer thought that buildings under 18 metres would require EWS1 forms. Now, as I say, this wasn't a government form. This is something that's overseen by the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors. The problem is that they've come along today, initially telling Inside Housing, we've spoken to them as well, saying that as far as they're concerned, you can't unlearn this knowledge. Once you know that there are problems with these buildings, once you know either the cladding problems or far beyond cladding, that there are problems, other fire safety problems, that lenders can't unlearn that knowledge and that they should be told that. Indeed, they told us today, that's the RICS, so that if the EWS process has begun, then a valuer cannot ignore this information when providing a valuation for mortgage purposes. Valuers should take account of all known information when valuing a property. Now, that is far removed from what Robert Jenrick told the House of Commons just last week when he said, "It's my expectation that these actions will significantly ease the challenges faced by the vast majority of leaseholders looking to buy or sell flats in high-rise buildings and ensure that leaseholders do not face huge bills for unnecessary remediation work." So, in many respects, many of these leaseholders feel they're right back to square one. We spoke to Giles Grover earlier. He's from the Manchester Cladiators group, one of the many, many people who have been faced, that we've spoken to and reported on this programme, who've been faced with enormous bills as a result of this crisis, and indeed ruinous ones as well.
We've spoken to fire experts, people from a couple of different fire services, and they're all saying essentially the same thing, that remediation is only set to continue because they're not suddenly going to walk back and say, you've got a vast range of internal and external defects, so some alarms should now be okay just because Robert Jenrick hopes that they will. So especially in the people under 18 metres buildings who are going to be forced to pay a loan scheme that we've called the cladding tax to fix the buildings, it's still desperately unfair. I only know one building across the whole of Greater Manchester that is going to get full help and doesn't have to pay anything. So whether you're in over 18 metres, under 18 metres, or even under 11 metres, you're still on the hook for just unaffordable costs running into tens of thousands to fix issues we didn't even have anything to do with creating. It's just desperately unfair.
So, guys, I spoke to the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government tonight. They told us this. For leaseholders who have already received an EWS1 form, the expert advice strongly recommends that these cases are reviewed to ensure the response is proportionate and prevents leaseholders from facing bills for work that is not needed. In line with the expert advice, we've set out that EWS1 forms should not be requested for buildings below 18 metres. We urge the market to follow this approach. I think critics of the government will say that encapsulates many of the problems that the government has in terms of its response, which is that they cajole, they say what they think should happen, what ought to happen, but when it comes to making something happen, we're seeing far less action.
Thank you very much indeed, Lewis. Well, joining me now is Ritu Saha, the co-founder of the UK Cladding Action Group. Good evening, Ritu Saha. What do you make of this latest mess?
Well, exactly as you said, Kirsty, it is a mess. And we leaseholders are stuck in the middle. This announcement was made with great fanfare, but it basically turned into a red herring or a dead cat, which was designed to deflect attention away from the building safety bill and the fact that it offers no protection for leaseholders. Mr. Jenrick says that this announcement will mean that buildings under 18 meters do not need an EWS1 form anymore. But as you have heard, the market is saying that no, that's not really right. We need to wait for the government to withdraw their own consolidated advice note, which the government has not yet done. And secondly, the lenders are saying that RICS needs to change its guidance that is used by surveyors to determine whether the EWS1 is necessary or not.
And as Lewis was saying, these inspections have thrown up issues other than cladding, which could also contribute to a failure to be able to get a mortgage in the future. The interesting thing is there is no pressure, is there, that the government can put on a lender to lend? Can't put a pressure on a bank to lend.
Absolutely, and that is what we are seeing from the statements that 8 lenders have given today to Inside Housing. It basically shows that the government can put out as many advice notes as they want, but lenders still want to see that the buildings that they are lending to are safe. And another interesting point is that the buildings insurance industry has not made any single comment about this mess because we are seeing lots of buildings have the buildings insurance increased by 1,000% or more. Will these insurers suddenly change their point of view and suddenly say that, oh, now we feel that these buildings under 18 meters are not safe anymore?
No, because even if every bit of paperwork was taken away, a lender could decide that actually this building is a bad bet because we think it's unsafe. So there's actually
absolutely
nothing that you can do. Now, you couldn't come into the studio tonight because you are a fire warden, and that is a relatively recent thing. Tell me why you're a fire warden.
So my building had cladding. It still has cladding. We have ACM cladding, similar to that found on Grenfell Tower, and we also have another kind of cladding called high-pressure laminate. So as a result, we have had to install a temporary fire alarm system within the building. And to accompany the temporary fire alarm system, it needs to be accompanied by a fire warden who stays in the building 24/7 to monitor whenever the fire alarm rings, spring into action to check whether it's a real fire or a false alarm, and then take action. Now, one fire warden costs £12,000 a month as a minimum. Our building used to have 2 since November of 2017, and our small building has been built over £500,000, and we have had to pay for these fire wardens.
So you do it yourself now?
Yeah, exactly. Because of the precarious financial position this left us in, we've had to volunteer. So now I spend 3 days a week as a fire warden for my building.
Thank you very much, Ritu Saha, for joining us tonight.
Thank you.